few days ago, Miranda Barber confessed to being a serial killer
who stopped counting her victims when she got to number 22.
I could potentially be sitting in front of the world's worst female serial killer of all time.
I always told everybody I thought Miranda was possessed.
Hi there. Glad to see you back here. Some serial killers try to hide every step of their horrific acts until the very last minute. Others get so cocky that they leave clues for the police detectives, taunting them as they believe they'll never get caught. But with some serial killers, the situation is even more confusing. When Miranda Barber was arrested for the murder of Troy LaFera, she confessed to killing at least 22 other people.
Are you saying that you have killed before? How many times, Miranda?
I know that when I hit 22, I stopped counting.
When you hit 22, you stopped counting.
For years, detectives had been trying to figure out whether she was telling the truth or simply bluffing, wanting to project a more menacing persona to the media. This satanic teenager had more than one or two disturbing events in her past. Let's dive into this case and discover the truth behind Miranda Barber. Miranda Barber was born on December 14th, 1994, in North Pole, Alaska. No, this isn't actually the North Pole, but it's pretty much just as cold, with snow and a gray sky being the norm. The whole city is decorated for Christmas year-round, but this didn't make life any jollier for little Miranda. She grew up with her mom, Elizabeth, her dad, and her older sister, Ashley. When she was 2 years old, she was diagnosed with developmental dysplasia. This meant that her hip joint did not form well, and she had to wear leg braces for a few years. These are the years that she was supposed to be running and playing with other kids, but she couldn't. Around this time, Miranda's uncle, Richard, moved into the same neighborhood. He was the husband of Elizabeth's sister, and he had a daughter the same age as Miranda. As a result of this, Miranda and Ashley would often spend days on end at their home. This is where it gets dark.
We discovered sexual abuse in her family. Her uncle Rick, her when Miranda was just 3 years old.
Richard was one of the most horrific as you can imagine. Every time he was home alone with the girls, he would subject them to some truly terrifying forms of abuse, with details so gruesome we actually can't discuss here. As you might imagine, he had scared the girls into not telling anyone about this. But after months of suffering, Ashley, who was 6, told her mom. Elizabeth immediately went to the police, and the officers rushed to Richard's house with a search warrant. Inside, they found a handwritten manual titled, "Fun with My Sister's Kids." He had detailed accounts of every horrific act he had committed against the girls and encouraged all fathers out there to do the same to their daughters, nieces, and granddaughters. He was arrested and sentenced to 19 years in prison. He was freed after only 10, but as he was caught on disturbed and illegal child websites, he was once again sent to prison, this time to 40 years. This monster may have been sent away, but for Miranda, the trauma was far from over.
She has this horrendous intergenerational demon, the demon of abuse.
The biggest things you hear from a lot of victims is, "I wasn't there. I can't tell you anything because I wasn't there." And that's one of the things that the mind can do. It's that ability to disassociate or to become somebody else. And so they put on this other persona, this other personality.
Tragically, Miranda's story mirrored that of her mother's. She had been violated by her own father when she was just a child. And perhaps unsurprisingly, Richard himself had been a victim of someone in his family when he was growing up. Elizabeth was devastated to learn that both her daughters had gone through something as horrific as this, and that she had trusted Richard all this time. She was often shielding Miranda and Ashley from spending time with their friends' families, afraid of such events, when the real monster was someone in her family. Shattered and desperate to move on, Elizabeth took her daughters and moved to Palmer, also in Alaska. Life there was good for Elizabeth and her daughters, but Miranda never forgot what she had gone through. This is what she wrote in her diary as a young teen. "I feel dirty, violated, hurt, and ashamed. How could he think that he had the right to hurt me and my sister the way he did? I wanted him to hurt worse than he hurt me. Many teenagers go through crazy phases when they try out dangerous things or they run away from home. But Miranda started exhibiting this worrying behavior when she was just 13 years old.
Miranda wouldn't come home for 2-3 days, week at a time.
Ashley also remembers Miranda joining dubious gangs at a very young age. Miranda had met a 25-year-old man called Forrest. He was the leader of a Satanic cult. Apparently, one day she returned home from one of her runaway trips and told her mom that Forrest owned her now. It's unclear whether Miranda was telling the truth and whether Elizabeth tried to investigate the situation at all. Miranda kept leaving home, and she would get into trouble at school more and more often. Now, substance abuse had become a part of her life too. Tragically, a very big part of her life.
You know there's a problem when you're out front of a house and you know your daughter's in there doing, and you turn to your 16-year-old daughter and argue with her about who's going in there to get her.
By the time Miranda was 14, she was also taking several prescription meds, including Prozac for depression and Adderall for ADHD. She had also been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disease and was taking medication for those too. As you can probably imagine by now, Miranda wasn't well. She even tried taking her own life several times. But although her mom had sent her to mental health specialists, she seemed to have forgotten about her now. Elizabeth and Miranda's dad went through a nasty divorce right around the time Miranda was a teenager. And according to Ashley, she would spend an awful amount of time distracted by TV, social media, and other men, all while ignoring her daughters.
She said you allowed her to be alone all day taking online classes, knowing that Miranda was on and being promiscuous. She says you told Ashley, don't call me again, when Ashley called crying because Miranda came at her with a knife.
Elizabeth was in completely over her head and simply didn't know how to handle Miranda's behavior anymore. So she decided to cut her out. This did not have a positive impact on Miranda. Lacking the attention and support from her family, Miranda turned to her gang friends for help. They set a horrific model for her. Illegal substances, vandalizing property, and sleeping for money became Miranda's daily activities. At one point, Miranda got pregnant with a customer and Forrest ordered her to get an abortion. But this wasn't a clean abortion done in a clinic, it was a backstreet procedure that left Miranda traumatized. So when she got pregnant again at the age of 17, she decided to keep her baby. Meanwhile, Miranda was still living with her mom, and she was becoming even more desperate to get her attention back. In a fairly big act, Miranda wrote to Dr. Phil, "Dear Dr. Phil, ever since my parents got divorced, my mom has become a pill-popping drunk. She meets random men off the internet and has them come over. She also claims to have stage 3 cancer but won't stop drinking or taking all the pills. She doesn't care to live anymore. She tells my sister and me that every day. I just want my mom. I'm at a loss of how to help her." Dr. Phil didn't respond to Miranda's letter, but the letter did attract the attention of the authorities. Since Miranda was still a minor and Elizabeth was deemed unfit to care for her daughter, Miranda was sent to North Carolina to live with her extended family. That's where Miranda met Elliot Barber. In 2011, a 17-year-old pregnant Miranda arrived in North Carolina. Before long, she met 20-year-old Elliot. At the time, he was together with a woman called Amy, and she was pregnant too, just like Miranda. The women gave birth to girls, just 2 months apart, and they ended up spending a lot of time together, as young moms who are happy to help each other out with their newborn daughters. Miranda became part of a strange triangle. She and Elliot had something else in common, their schizophrenia. Unfortunately, Elliot was also addicted to illegal substances, particularly pills. According to him, they made the voices in his head go away. But one day he overdosed and never fully recovered afterward. He began to drink and abuse substances more than ever. As a result of this, he also became more violent. After months of enduring this, Amy decided to call it quits with Elliot. She took her baby daughter and left the city. Mere days had passed, and Elliot was already together with Miranda. Their love for the Satanic only evolved while they were together. They read about the occult, and they even practiced what they thought was a satanic intercourse. This meant that they would harm each other and then have intercourse while bleeding. When Miranda was 18, the couple decided to get married and run away from North Carolina, together with Miranda's daughter Aria. Next stop, Pennsylvania. In 2013, Miranda and Elliot arrived in Pennsylvania, a young couple with their whole lives ahead of them. But they were desperate for money, and they had a baby to feed too. So Miranda put an ad on Craigslist, female companionship in exchange for money. This was not the first time Miranda had done this. Remember, she started this while she was in Forrest's gang, and this is now how she got pregnant in the first place. Except this time, things would turn very ugly. One man who replied to Miranda's ad was 42-year-old Troy LaFerrara. At the time, Troy was an engineer living with his wife of 2 years, Colleen. But things were not as peachy as they might have seemed for the couple. Troy had been cheating on his wife for the whole duration of their relationship, seeking adultery in the form of services by women on the internet. So on November 11th, 2013, Troy was set to meet Miranda. But Miranda and Elliot had plans very different from what Troy was hoping for.
So you just decided you're gonna kill
We just decided that we were gonna kill somebody. We had no reason, no anything else other than that.
Miranda met Troy in a shopping mall parking lot. Troy got into her car and the two drove off to a more private place. What Troy didn't know was that Elliot was hiding under a blanket under the back seat of the car. When the car stopped, Miranda said the code sentence, "Have you seen the stars tonight?" That's when Elliot jumped out of the blanket and grabbed Troy from behind his seat, strangling him with a TV cable. Meanwhile, Miranda stabbed him.
I stabbed him once and it didn't do anything.
She stabbed him in the groin, she stabbed him in the neck, and it went through. Then went out to eat it right off. It was delicious.
While it wasn't as straightforward as Elliot tries to make it sound, the first time Miranda gave the stars signal, Elliot didn't react. It was only the second time, after punching him through the blanket, that he emerged. Then, as the two were attacking Troy, he put up a serious fight with both of them. In between, he even managed to open the car door and put his leg out. The lights inside the car opened, and Miranda started panicking that people down the road could see them. She shouted at Elliot, who jumped out of the car and pushed Troy back inside. Miranda attacked Troy with a knife 20 times. This was too much for him to fight, and tragically, he lost his life that night. Miranda and Elliot drove Troy's body and dumped it in a narrow alleyway in the area, but not before stealing the $150 in his wallet. Then they went to Walmart and got cleaning supplies to erase all the evidence from their car. Then, just like Elliot said, they went and had dinner. A nice dinner, with all the $150 they'd just stolen from the man they killed. Oh yeah, it was also Elliot's birthday. As a present, Miranda committed the murder, then took him out to a restaurant and to a strip club. Sheesh. The next morning, Troy's body was discovered in the alleyway. The first thing police noticed was just how viciously he'd been attacked.
So I got up there and I was like, what's going on? He said, whoever wanted this man dead wanted him really, really dead.
The next logical step was for the police to look through Troy's phone, much to his wife's jargon.
We found companionship sites from the day he was killed.
The police officers brought Miranda in for questioning. The facts were pretty out there. They knew she was supposed to meet Troy that night, and hers was the last phone number Troy had called. But Miranda had prepared a story for this case.
So you were going to meet up with this guy, make a couple bucks?
Yes.
Okay. Were you on the phone with him at all, or talking to him, or messaging him?
We were messaging back and forth, yes.
Okay.
We were just supposed to meet up at Denny's, but it never happened.
Meeting never happened?
Yes.
However, the police detective reminded Miranda that they knew Troy's last phone call was to her on the night of his death.
So I'm going to ask you right now a very basic, very simple question.
Okay.
That you need to answer either yes or no to.
Okay.
Were you involved in Or do you have any knowledge of the death of that guy, the death of Troy?
No.
Then, as the police continued to question her, Miranda started acting more aggressively towards them, demanding that they let her get back to her daughter. And when the officer told her that they needed to seize her phone as evidence, things escalated.
Actually, Miranda, we gotta take your phone, put it in evidence, and then get a search warrant to go through.
That's not fair to me at all.
That's what we have to do.
I have the right to walk out of here with all of my belongings, which I'm going to do.
Not with your phone. We're gonna take your phone.
I'm very offended right now.
I'm sorry.
I have time. I need numbers. I need my phone numbers.
You understand we have a job to do.
I did not kill that man. I've never met that man in my life before.
I hope not.
I'm a single. I just got married. You guys are coming in my life, questioning me. I'm very offended.
Of course, we all know that she was lying through her teeth. Her being very offended was just an act meant to intimidate the police, but it only made them more suspicious of her.
Do you understand why we're questioning you?
Do you understand why I feel the way that I feel?
No. Do you understand why we're questioning you?
I don't.
So
I never met up with
so
him.
your phone number being the last...
Yes, but I never met up with this man.
Understandable, but do you think that maybe is something we need to check into?
I want to go home to my baby who is screaming her head off for me.
Miranda literally left, kicking and screaming as the police struggled to seize her phone. That same night, the police brought Elliot in for questioning. He'd been married to Miranda for 40 days at the time of his arrest. The first question the detective had for Elliot, apart from how to pronounce his name, was what he knew about Miranda being the last person Troy called.
What do you know? Alright, I guess full honesty here, I've never heard of him, and I don't know anything about that. But the only thing I know is that what my wife does is meet with someone who's willing to just pay you some money to have a nice conversation and sit down. Doesn't provide anything other than companionship, because that's what they want.
The detective questioned Elliot further about what exactly Miranda's Craigslist ad entailed.
I don't know if you've ever seen the type of movies to where someone goes to I'm saying she's poor, but that's a comparison. A guy goes to he's totally about to have with her, then he breaks down, and then the whole scene is him crying, oh, I hate my life, I love my wife so much, but she's just being a bitch. And then she's just filing her nails, listening to him, and then she gets paid for the companionship.
The detective then told Elliot that Miranda had actually met Troy on Elliot's birthday. Elliot even seemed a bit upset, and he said he would have a chat when he got home that night. He was much more believable than Miranda. Both he and Miranda were dismissed that evening, and the detectives were racking their heads to find a way to prove Miranda's guilt and get a warrant for her arrest. Meanwhile, Miranda and Elliot were back home with their friend Shay. They'd been living at her place since their arrival from North Carolina. They were having a chat when Miranda told Shay all of a sudden that she'd just stabbed a man. After a few seconds of shock and disbelief, Shay realized she was telling the truth. She urged Miranda to hand herself in. Incredibly enough, she did. She said farewell to Shay, her baby daughter, and Elliot, who was crying, all too aware that this was the end of Miranda's freedom. At 4 a.m., 7 hours after the police dismissed her, Miranda showed up at the police station doorstep, admitting to the crime. But she had concocted another story.
I arranged to meet up with him, and I pulled in the mall. I saw him. He got in my car. Everything seemed fine, and as soon as I put the car in park, everything just completely flipped upside down. I didn't know what to do. He just attacked me.
What was he doing to you?
One hand was on my throat, with the other hand was touching me down there.
This all sounds horrific, except it's all a big lie. Troy never forced himself onto Miranda. She was trying to paint the picture of self-defense.
I do have 3 knives in my car. I usually carry one on me, and I just grabbed it.
What happened after you took the knife?
I stabbed him once, and it didn't do anything. And I stabbed him again, and it didn't do anything. It was still being continued. There was nothing that changed.
If Miranda's confession was the only piece of evidence the police had, her lie might have worked. But as they were interrogating her, the police also got their hands on CCTV footage, clearly showing her, Elliot, and Troy inside the car. So the detectives went over to Elliot's house, asking a few more questions. When Elliot opened the door, the detective told him they now had CCTV, showing that he was at the meeting too. Elliot was just smoking a cigarette. Hearing the detective's words, he said something along the lines of, "Okay, so this is my last cigarette as a free man." The detective certainly wasn't expecting this. Just like Miranda, Elliot seemed relieved to be able to confess. The police didn't even suspect Elliot of murder or even being an accomplice because at the time, they believed Miranda's self-defense story. Elliot was immediately brought over to the police station. This time, he confessed to everything: their plan to kill someone on his birthday, the method, and the reality behind Miranda's Craigslist ad.
He was looking. She misleadingly sold him through texts, but that was never the intention. The whole intention was to kill him.
The confession was as straightforward as a confession could be. The police had all the information on a plate.
I'm in the back seat, covered up by a blanket. He gets in the car, probably around 8. So I pop up with that what y'all found on the body. That was me.
Where do you have that cable at? Just right around his body? Around the throat? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, good. It was pretty good.
The same.
In between the headpiece and the bottom was where I tried to angle it up underneath it, and I put my feet up against the back and pulled as hard as I could.
Elliot seemed pretty proud of his deed. Throughout the confession, his tone is jolly, and he's eager to share details that the police didn't even request, like the great burgers he and Miranda had after murdering Troy.
They went out to eat at Red Robin. It was delicious. It was delicious. It was delicious. What did you eat? I ate a burger. It was fantastic.
Get the unlimited fries? Get the unlimited fries?
That's it. It was amazing. Every bit of it was amazing.
Elliot's confession was baffling to the detective. Not only did he seem remorseless, but he truly enjoyed describing the evening of his birthday and the horrific murder. Not once did he appear to grasp the gravity of the situation. Elliot and Miranda were arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Troy LaFerrara. The police ruled the motive to be financial gain, simply because the two had stolen $150 from the victim. However, the real motive seems to be truly random. One day, Miranda and Elliot decided they both wanted to kill someone, so they started planning it. And it's about to get even more confusing. Although Elliot had just confessed to everything, both he and Miranda pleaded not guilty at their pretrial. By now, they were making headlines nationwide. What made the case even more newsworthy was Miranda's appearance. She was a 19-year-old girl with a pretty face that no one would expect to hurt a fly. You might be forgiven for thinking Miranda didn't want to be the center of attention, but she did. She enjoyed being in the media spotlight, so one day, from within the Northumberland County Prison in Pennsylvania, Miranda made a phone call to a journalist.
One day I got a phone call from somebody inside the jail who said, "You are now scheduled for an hour visit."
Are you saying that you have killed before? How many times, Miranda?
I know that when I hit 22, I stopped counting.
When you hit 22, you stopped counting.
The journalist was shocked to hear Miranda's confession. This was big.
I could potentially be sitting in front of the world's worst female serial killer of all time.
Of course, Miranda went on to become a major topic discussed on the news all over the U.S.
Just a few days ago, Miranda Barber confessed to being a serial killer
who stopped counting her victims when she got to number 22.
Immediately, Miranda became a sensation. How could a 19-year-old girl kill over 20 people and get away with it?
Well, since I turned 12, my entire life flipped upside down when I turned 12.
Why? What happened at 12?
I got into a gang, started doing drugs, just skipped school all the time, and the gang that I was in, it was based around Satanism.
Miranda went on to say that she had been killing people since she was 12, under the influence of Forrest and his gang.
How have you done it? All with stabbing?
No, all different kinds.
Like?
The very first time I was 13, and the leader of the gang, he had me lure this guy, and I'll never forget it, no matter how high I was. I'll never forget it.
Miranda described in great detail how she and Forrest lured a man into an alleyway, then Forrest shot him and made Miranda shoot the deadly final bullet. Then she went on to say that their bodies are all over the US, in Alaska, California, Texas, and Florida, but she only lived in Alaska and Pennsylvania. Another pretty crazy part of Miranda's story is that she believes she only killed bad people. Apparently in Troy's case, she decided to kill him when she joked with him that she was actually 16, not 18, and he said he was fine with that. In her opinion, this made him a bad person and he deserved to die. However, as Elliot said, Miranda and her husband had been planning to kill someone for quite some time when they lured Troy into their car. Things weren't really adding up. Detectives even decided to question Elliot about it.
Do you believe this?
Do I believe her?
You, Elliot, to
I believe her.
us in the room.
Yes.
You believe.
100%. I fully believe she killed these people. No part of me doubts that. I always told everybody I thought Miranda was possessed.
According to Elliot, whenever Miranda was possessed by a demon, she would become Super Miranda, and that's when the murders would occur. This sounded bogus, a story meant for Miranda to attract more attention, but the police couldn't risk laughing it off. The FBI got involved and started looking for evidence of Miranda's supposed 20-plus killings, but they found nothing. Even Miranda's dad came out and told the press that his daughter wasn't a serial killer, just a serial liar. So why the lies? This is when psychologists started looking into Miranda's past.
The fact that Miranda did have a history here and this crime was so incredibly violent, I felt that there must be more to her and more to her past than had been reported on.
Soon enough, they found the gruesome acts of violence and abuse that she had been subjected to by her Uncle Richard. It seems like Miranda's coping mechanism for her trauma was to create an alter ego.
And that's one of the things that the mind can do, is that ability to disassociate or to become somebody else. And so they put on this other persona, this other personality, to the point where 90% of their life is this fantasy, is this elaborated life, and 10% of it is the truth of what's really there.
Miranda and Elliot pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As there is no evidence of other crimes, Miranda wasn't convicted of any other murders. Ashley and Elizabeth appeared on Dr. Phil in 2014 and spoke out for Miranda not to be seen as a monster.
How do you process that?
It's hard to process.
How is she not a cold-hearted monster?
I think she was influenced by her husband.
Tragically, 2 years after the interview, Elizabeth took her own life. Miranda's actions took a terrible toll on her mental health and on so many other people. Meanwhile, she continued to seek the media's attention. In 2016, she told the press that the real motive behind the murder was that so she could get arrested and her daughter would be taken into care by social services, who are more competent at raising children than her. But she could have done that without murdering somebody, right? Then in 2018, she spoke to the press again and revealed that her serial killer story was indeed fake. Miranda Barber's case is a truly sad story about a victim turned murderer. Many people go through traumatic experiences as children, and they choose to seek professional help and support from their inner circle. Sadly, in Miranda's case, the red flags were spotted too late, and instead of seeking help, she did the very worst. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't be shy, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel for more. Till next time, and stay safe.